Hi guys, we're coming to you from Stereo Speakers Refurbished in Georgia. Hello there. We're going to do a quick little video on comic books. We now have gotten into something that we hope other people would join us and maybe get interested in. We talked about stereos a little bit in one video, refurbishing speakers with the foam core. We don't really replace the electronics inside the stereo equipment. We have people like Norman's Electronics and those people replacing capacitors and diodes. The older stereo equipment from Pioneer in the 1960s, 70s, and early 80s, the silver-faced units, yes, I would maybe go through the trouble with the big knobs in the front and the panel that lights up, and you move the knob and you see the needle move across and catch the stereo stations. The older stereo equipment from Kenwood and Pioneer, I would consider refurbishing that, possibly, if you could afford it. I see people selling it refurbished where they have replaced all the capacitors and the diodes, and inside they've gone all the way down to the board because the diodes and the capacitors wear out. So turntables, people are going back to vinyl records. If you're aware, reel-to-reel, when I grew up, reel-to-reel was the only thing that was professional. We didn't have digital recording abilities. It wasn't invented yet. But video tapes like VHS, I got interested today in laser disc. What's a laser disc? So we're always experimenting, and also all kinds of digital cameras with Sony using a little 3-inch compact disc. A lot of people don't even know that Sony made a little 3-inch compact disc that was recordable to take photographs on. So we're always looking for new things to get ourselves into. I used to collect vinyl records, and when I collected vinyl records, I noticed the quality of the little stereo cassette tapes you buy for $5. Those cassette tapes, they were poor quality. Whoever made those out of Capitol Records, whoever made those cassette tapes or the 8-track tapes, they didn't use a real good quality tape. So stick with the vinyl records. I'm glad, I'm so hoping that other people did not get rid of your records. 45s and vinyl records, save those vinyl records. So now we're getting into comic books. We won't talk about cameras at the moment. We'll get in another video about which cameras to buy and which cameras are good cameras to buy. I'm talking about cameras from film cameras. We enjoy digital, and we do use digital, but I have an interest in film cameras. I love them long ago. This is the mini books that Whitman and Gold Key used to make. This is Archie. There's still people on eBay and Amazon that sell these little mini books. They were probably $1 or 75 cents, but this is Archie. Archie comic books, real small. Disney did mini digests of their comics with Disney. The same thing. One of my favorites, I recommend highly. Who doesn't know, who grew up in the 60s? Space Ghost. Started with Alex Hoff, the designer for HannaBarbera. It was on comic books. It was called Super TV Heroes. There's about 6 or 7 copies of Super TV Heroes or Super Action Heroes from HannaBarbera. Who's the publisher? Gold Key. This is not Gold Key, but this was $4.50. I used to buy these comics for 25 cents, no more than 50 cents back in the 60s. Here's the front and back of Space Ghost. This is a newer one. I didn't have the ability to buy the newer ones. The first copy of Space Ghost could be expensive from HannaBarbera. Where's Huddles? Harlem Globetrotters. I liked Gold Key because Gold Key would duplicate all the HannaBarbera, Flintstones, Jetsons, Herculoids, Space Ghost, Birdman, things like the Wacky Races, Dasterderly+mutley, Penelope Pitstop, and the gang. There was a spin-off of the Flintstone called Pebbles and Bam Bam. Believe it or not, these DVDs now can be collected at Target. Target now is selling vintage HannaBarbera cartoons. I don't have a big collection of Roadrunner, but I did like Roadrunner a lot. I like Pink Panther a lot. Roadrunner and the Coyote was really good with Warner Brothers. If you ever have a chance to see an 8mm projector or 16mm projector in a high school auditorium like I did of the Warner Brothers cartoons, Roadrunner, it was impressive. I don't think they'll bring that back. They won't bring, but we're getting into now learning and trying to learn how to repair and upgrade 8mm projectors also. That'll be another video. Here's another one, Batman. The first copy sells for $1 to $2 million in 1939. Can you believe that? This is probably 50 cents back in the 60s or 70s. Cardboard recommended, and put it in plastic to keep it looking nice. The pages will get worn. Back when I grew up as a kid, we didn't put comics in plastic wrap like they do today to protect it. I wish we did. And I was at a summer camp called Pine Hollow Day Camp in East Aurora, New York, ran by my grandfather. And special thanks go to Paul Becker, Seal Becker, and the Becker family, Christina, Anna, Julie, Maria, Anastasia. Julie, Christina, Anna, Maria I grew up with. And we used to take comic books to Pine Hollow Camp, and I have very vivid memories of also going to Canada and going to with my grandfather, Ted Becker, and Ted Becker Sr. and Jr., and Jeff Becker, and Larry Becker, Mark Becker, Barbara Becker, Lyndall Becker, Virginia Becker. Great memories of comic books. Grew up with Richie Rich, Casper the Ghost. It's either Harvey Comics, if it isn't Harvey Comics, Sad Sack, or it'd be Gold Key. You've probably never heard of these publishers. All you've heard is DC and Marvel. But there is Whitman also. Here's a copy of Fantastic Four. Look at the price. I mean, 15 cents, 25 cents for a comic book. That's what I would do. I'd walk to the local drugstore every weekend and go through the comic rack. I would recommend you go to places like Titan Comics in Atlanta. Look them up. There's New York comic dealers, New York City, that sell comic books. In Dallas, Texas, there's a bunch of comic book dealers online. You can buy the comics on eBay, Amazon. But Fantastic Four, 64 pages. Also, the original Spider-Man, original Superman, Batman, going for $500,000 to $1 million for a comic book? Hard to believe. Here's Walt Disney. They did Snow White. They did 101 Dalmatians. This is Aristocats. Some of the people on eBay are so nice when I buy comics and buy it for $2 and do the $1 shipping. I can buy these at comic book conventions in Atlanta, like Toy Atlanta and Joe Atlanta. But it's more fun to go through the boxes over also at another comic book store I highly recommend besides Titan Comics. I think at 4 locations in Lawrenceville and in Swanee and other places. Is if it isn't Titan Comics in Atlanta, Joe Atlanta has comic books, but there's an Atlanta Comic Convention 4 times a year in Atlanta, Georgia. Just to give you an example. Here's Daffy Duck, Gold Key. Gold Key did all the TV shows from the 60s and 70s. Gold Key did all the Hanna-Barbera stuff. Here's something that I wish I hadn't got rid of, but I don't know what happened to my original one. This is Batman in a super huge size comic book, $1. Today this would probably be $5 or $10, but it has about maybe 15 or 20 pages. It has pin-up posters in it. Why did I like this? Original Batman, I think of Adam West, Bear Ward. I don't think of Batman originally when I saw Batman with the movie with Michael Keaton. I mean, we did like the fact that Warner Brothers was making The Dark Knight, but between Christian Bale, who does a great job, and Michael Keaton and George Clooney, and now you've got the actors from Pearl Harbor doing Batman. You know, I'll always think of Batman only as one person, Adam West, Burt Ward, from the 60s TV show. That show went from ABC TV, and it was going to be sold to NBC, but they tore down the Batcave. That's why they didn't continue it on. Because Batman was so popular in the 60s, every kid wanted the record. We wanted the Viewmaster show. We wanted to watch Batman and meet Batman at the car shows, meet Adam West. The Batcave was impressive. The Batmobile, designed by George Barris. So if you can find these older Batman comic books, grab them. I mean, and then here's something I want to show real quick. I go on eBay, and I went to, before they had Amazon, there was eBay with a thing called eBay Classifieds, and there was a thing called swap.com. And on swap.com, I was able to get a HannaBarbera book. I bought all the HannaBarbera not videos, but HannaBarbera DVDs. Vintage HannaBarbera. And Yogi Bear, Scooby-Doo, Flintstones, Jetsons. Look at the quality of this book. I mean, it is impressive. It has great illustrations in here. You almost take these out of here and put them up in a, they could be framed almost. Flintstones, Scooby-Doo, very impressive book. I think I paid a few dollars for this. Probably something to do with Cartoon Network, with Ted Turner at CNN. And then here's another Flintstones, Official Guide to Cartoon Classic by Jerry Beck, The Flintstones. Very impressive book. I mean, I bought this and I could not believe the artwork that was in here. This is probably just like the cells you see from the Flintstones with HannaBarbera. Really cool. Look at the drawings in here, all this information here about the Flintstones. Flintstones was on a long time, like 4 or 5 years. Depicted from Jackie Gleason from The Honeymooners. Here's another book, the same kind of author, publisher, The Jetsons. Official Guide to the Cartoon Classic. Look at this, Judy Jetson. Very impressive, very large and colorful, just like the original cells, hand-drawn by HannaBarbera. You remember when you watch the Jetsons and Flintstones, when they made a comic cartoon for something that lasted a few minutes, there's hundreds and hundreds of drawings, just like Walt Disney. A lot of the people that left HannaBarbera when it closed, unfortunately, and it was sold off to Cartoon Network, a lot of those people left HannaBarbera. They all went to Warner Brothers. So we still had a lot of people who drew those wacky races and Dick Dastardly and the Scooby-Doo and all that. You can get it all on DVD. Like I said, some of it's sold at Target. It's for sale at Best Buys. It's for sale on eBay, Amazon. I have tried to build a collection of HannaBarbera DVDs, and I still pull them out and still watch them all the time. Birdman, the Herculoids, Mighty Mightor, Moby Dick. You know, these are Adamant. What I liked about Gold Key was when they were filming the TV shows Saturday mornings for kids, you could buy the comic books. There's the back of the Jetsons. You could buy the comic books, and you know, you could go to watch with the Easy Show projector and the Viewmaster and things like the Give a Show projector. You could still watch your HannaBarbera cartoons and Bugs Bunny from Warner Brothers, Daffy Duck from Warner Brothers, I believe. And you know, it was impressive that back in those days we didn't have video games. They weren't invented yet. There was no such thing as Atari yet. So kids got entertained from comic books, which taught people how to read. If you were Spanish and Latino and you're from Mexico, what's the best way to learn English? Watch and observe videos on YouTube. And before that, you used to do Sesame Street. You watch Sesame Street? You want to learn English? How do you learn English? If you speak Spanish. Watch Sesame Street. It teaches the basics of English, because English could be very difficult to learn for somebody from a foreign country. So anyways, I've been collecting Spider-Man for a long time, and I paid a $2 subscription from Stan Lee and Marvel Comics. I remember when Stan Lee started out, I was pretty young. I was probably about, I was born in the 60s, and Stan Lee was creating his comics in the 60s, so he's a little older than I am, and he recently passed away. And Stan Lee with Johnny Romita, I believe, the artist, they did some incredible work with The Amazing Spider-Man. That was my favorite character, and my parents actually created a Spider-Man costume for me at Halloween. I was into Spider-Man way before Spider-Man came to Marvel movies. Each Marvel movie now is clearing $800 million. That's pretty impressive for a movie like Wonder Woman to make $800 million. Now we're coming out with Captain America, and it's not a male figure. Now all the female action heroes. Can you imagine the toys coming out now? I looked at the toys at Books A Million. I couldn't believe it. The people who run Marvel Studios, they're gearing that the girls want to get in on the action too. Why make all these superheroes, space robots, cars, comic books, G.I. Joes? It's all geared towards the boys. You think girls don't have an interest in this stuff too? I mean, the girls do the Barbie dolls, you know, of course, they don't do G.I. Joes, but I have men friends that collect Barbie dolls, and if you have the original Barbie doll, I think from 1959 or so, Ruth Handler and Elliot Handler creating Mattel out of their garage, basically. You know, I have a book about Mattel. I'll get into that in another video. But Mattel was at one time making $500 million a year in toys. That's a lot of money back in the 1960s out of Hawthorne, California. And when these toys were made, what I love about Hot Wheels, original toys, I don't buy the newer Hot Wheels. This was made in California. It was assembled in California. It wasn't made in China. So take note that thanks to Mattel for keeping the business in Hawthorne, California, Hasbro and other companies like Ideal Toys out of Cincinnati, Ohio with Kenner, they moved everything overseas to China, and they moved it over to Vietnam and Malaysia. I know this is going to happen eventually because the cost of living and the expenses get expensive, but you know, where do they design the toys? Where do they do the prototypes? It's all done in America, you know. And anyways, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. I think it's Stereo Speakers Refurbished to Georgia. You'll see me on Facebook, Stephen Becker, Atlanta. You got questions, make comments, thumbs up, thumbs down. Like I said, we've got Final Cut Studio, and we're going to do editing in the future, so don't worry, these videos will get better. And enjoyed talking to you. Before I leave, I just want to show Stan Lee doing this book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. You can learn how to draw like John and Stan Lee. I like John Romita. When he did Spider-Man in 1971, 72, 73, 74, Spider-Man was incredible, the comics. It was on different print paper. It was probably, I mean, think about it, 15 cents, 10 cents for a comic, 25 cents for a comic book. Now the comic books today, I see comics. I can understand why this book would be sold paperback. I had 2 copies of this. Here's the back of it. Stan Lee, the publisher, maybe, actually it's Simon & Schuster is the publisher. But anyways, Marvel Comics out of New York City. I remember when Marvel started in a small little office, and Stan Lee was told that Spider-Man would never make it. Spider-Man was something would not work out. That who would want to ever read a Spider-Man comic? And look at how popular Spider-Man is. I'm so thankful to Marvel Studios for finally making the Avengers and making Spider-Man and the Hulk. We've waited a long time for Marvel to make movies, and now that Marvel's making the movies at $800 million profit per movie, hey, Star Wars, Revenge of the Jedi, and the original Star Wars with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford. The original Star Wars, when it came out in '77, nobody ever thought it would be popular. Kenner was the only company that made the toys, and thank God Kenner did make the toys, or we wouldn't have had any little small toys for the boys and the girls, I guess, to play with. The spaceships, the Millennium Falcons. But I was a comic book collector, and my parents would buy also Billy Blastoff toys. I don't know if you remember that. So we'll sign off now. And like I said, the next video we'll do, it won't be comic books. Maybe we can get into cameras and go over some more cameras, talking about Minolta, how inexpensive it was. Even though Minolta wasn't as good as Nikon or Canon, Minolta was a really good company because it made lenses. You get a lens and it says 1.4, 1.8, 2.8 on a lens. Grab it, buy it if it's used on eBay. Because a 50 millimeter lens, or an 80 to 200 or 80 to 300 millimeter lens, if it says f4, f5.6, I'm not telling you not to buy it, but it has very limited capabilities. The lens is a narrow diameter barrel. It won't let as much light through the lens, and you're going to get a lot of pictures that are out of focus or lens shake. You know, you're going to have to use a tripod almost to take half the pictures if they're sports pictures. f5.6 with a camera on a lens, or f4, nothing wrong with it. It's just that f1.4, 1.8, f2.8, the lenses cost more money, but in the long run, if you can buy a used lens that's Sigma or Tamron and put it on a Nikon body, or use a Sigma or Tamron lens and put it on a Canon body, or Pentax, Olympus, or the Mamiya lenses, Mamiya RB67, Mamiya 645, the Mamiya 645J, the 645 1000S. I mean, I can't say anything negative about Mamiya.